Hey guys, so I'm gonna do a video on protrusion of injectors for 12 valve. I've seen it a couple times and never really paid much attention to the post, to be totally honest with you, but had a guy asking about it. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna show how to measure it, if you need to measure it. You know, it's one of those things. So anyways, I figured I'd do a video on it. It's not gonna be a real long video tonight, but we'll do up a video. So I got injector with a sack style nozzle on it. So the nozzle is, the sack on the nozzle is a little bit longer than some of the VOC or a microblind style. They're shorter. So depending on how big the sack is how that is determined. But so if you're measuring, you want to measure how far this is going to stick out. And now for this instance, I'm not even going to put a washer in there. So for instance, just going to check this to make sure we are zeroed. So what you're going to do is you take that from the head and then come straight down on top of the nozzle. So this nozzle sticks out 213 thou, and that's with no washer at all. Now, so if we put a 60 thou washer in there, I got more than one sitting here. You put a 60 thou washer in there. The 60 thou washer is going to adjust it from 243 to 143. And the reason for that is the angle that it's on, right? We're not measuring perfectly straight. This is a brand new head, Chinese head, mind you, or aftermarket, if you want to be technical. So I prefer them to stick out more, especially if you're going to do any hot rodding on it. Checking this, honestly, you'd never have to worry, and that's actually the question that I had today, was whether or not it's going to hit when it could have hit the piston. So I brought a piston out. So checking that at 100 and what were we with no washer, was 243 thou. So we were at 243 thou of the nozzle sticking out on an angle, coming perfectly straight, or as perfectly straight as you're going to measure it with a caliper. That's not really technically the proper way to measure it if you wanted to measure it properly, but close enough for what we're doing. So get this over here, 243 thou of protrusion on it with no washer at all. Now, don't get me wrong, you can't run it with no washer. You have to run it with a washer. But now, if you take this is injector, no washer. Now, basically, by running a thin washer, which is that one, versus a thick washer, all you do is you change the angle. Oh, I shouldn't say angle, you don't change the angle. You change the depth that the injector is going to go, get this into view, the depth that the injector's not that far in there, but the injector is going to spray inside the bowl. So for a performance application, you don't want, if you have the top of the spray pattern kind of coming like that, for something that you're using constantly, like on the street driving, that was probably not in the right spot, but just for sake of drawing them on there, you want a perfect burn, or what I classify as a perfect burn in bowl, is going to be kind of like that. So you'll see like a little bit of a clean spot, or not a clean spot, but a different color spot where it's coming around, where the fire is coming around. If you get them way way out here, then the amount of timing for how far the bowl is up there is too much. So that's the reason that you use thin. So this is the thick washer, which is, pretty sure it's 60 thou. We just measured it, so yeah. Measures 64 thou actually, but 60 thou. And then a thin one that I have here measures 22, 23 thou. So there's a thick, there's a thin. Basically, this is the thinnest one you can put in there, but this is the ones that I run all the time. Now, basically what you can do, now running the thin copper washer on your 12 valve injector is gonna put it down in here farther, so it imitates, I guess, it doesn't imitate timing, but it makes it so when you add more timing, you keep the fire down inside here versus like way up here where you don't want it. Because you want the fire to happen in the bowl, it come around the bowl and shove the piston down. Now if it's happening way out here, you're not getting the same effect and you're actually heat soaking the top of the piston, which is not designed to do. So basically, if you're gonna run stock timing with stock injectors, you wanna run a thick copper washer. And if you're going to run anything performance-wise that you want to add timing to, if you're changing the injectors, don't get me wrong, if you're staying below 18 degrees, even probably 20 degrees, this washer will work. But I would recommend, especially if you have the injectors out, to go to a thin washer, because you can add more timing, it keeps it in the bowl. Now, that also, the reason that Cummins used the spec that they used was an emissions thing. So, but you got to remember, emissions at 12.5 degrees, 13 degrees, 14 degrees, this copper washer is what they wanted you to use. Now, not many of us are leaving the trucks stock. So if that's the case, then when you're changing injectors, having rebuilt injectors, I would recommend going to the thin washer, so that you're keeping everything inside the bowl the way that you want. So now on with the story, I suppose. Now, as far as how far this is away, I've actually already figured out all the math. But here, actually, I'll flip this over. I got it on the other side. So here's all the math that I wrote out. So new head, no washers, 243,000 or 243 thou. And stock piston, the height from here to the top of the surface. Now unsurfaced pistons, obviously stock pistons. This is a stock bowl, inner cold bowl. Your 368 thou, and then your piston protrusion at 30 thou, which is actually above the limit and then a stock head gasket of 61 thou. If you take the injector at 240 thou minus your piston protrusion, which is 30 thou, you're left with 273. And if you take the extra 30 thou, which is actually 31 thou, but for simplicity I put 30. The difference between your head gaskets, because your head gasket is going to add 30 thou to the thickness between the head and the block, right? Or the head and the piston, I guess, in this case, piston. So there's 30 thou, and the 368 was the distance from the top of the combustion bowl dome to the top of the piston. So you're 398 thou. So if you take those two and you divide them, you end up with 125 thou clearance between this surface right here, which the injector is basically centered in, kind of like this, right? Or I guess I could use the injector kind of like this. With no washer at all, you still have 125 thou clearance. So if you've surfaced more than 125 thou off of the head and or block to combine 125 thou, the block and the head are junk. So you don't really need to. Even doing a 6-1 build where you're using a 6-7 crank, 5-9 pistons, and then you chop chop a bunch off the top of the piston, which you wouldn't use this piston for. It's the wrong design for doing that. But doing that, you're still only talking, you take off 80 thou, and that's with no copper washer. So there's no way for this to hit that. You don't have to worry about it. So just don't worry about that. So like I said, if you're doing performance, use these guys. This is my opinion. If you're doing performance, use the real thin ones, which are like 22 to 25 thou. And then if you're going to stay stock with stock timing or close to stock timing, let's say within 5-6 degrees of stock timing, you can just use a factory style washer. And usually when you buy the kit, it's going to come with an assortment. It'll come with, I think there's 4 sizes, so there's these 2 and then 2 in between. So you have the option when you buy the kit, the install kit. So anyways, I just wanted to do that just so that guys knew. And it's not really rocket science when it really comes down to it, but you hear a lot of people, I see lots of posts and lots of people talking about stuff, and I like to explain. It's hard to explain over messaging sometimes with some of that stuff, so it's easier for me to do a video, and then anybody that needs to watch the video can watch the video. So that is going to wrap this one up. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. Yeah, we'll go from there. All right, thanks, guys.